In the heart of darkness, where the Congo River coils like a serpent, a single scream pierced the humid night aboard the SS Karnak. Sir Henry Carmichael, the greatest explorer of his age, clutched the emerald scarab at his throat, eyes wide with accusation, before collapsing dead at the feet of 20 witnesses. No arrow, no dagger, only the faint scent of bitter almonds, and the knowledge that every soul on this boat had reason to wish him silenced forever. Somewhere in the shadows, Hercule Poirot opened his eyes and murmured, "Mon Dieu, the game, I think, has begun." Chapter 1. The Gathering Storm. The SS Karnak lay upon the Congo like a white swan asleep on black glass. It was the night of the 14th of August 1936, and the equatorial moon, vast and low, poured molten silver across the river so brightly that every ripple seemed edged with fire. From the dense walls of the rainforest came the ceaseless throb of drums, now near, now far, as though the continent itself possessed a heart that would not cease beating. On the upper promenade deck, the air hung thick with frangipani, engine oil, and the faint, sweet stench of the mangroves that lined the unseen banks. Hercule Poirot, a small and immaculate figure in midnight blue evening dress, stood at the rail and allowed the warm breeze to toy with the points of his moustache. He had come to Africa, he told himself, only because Sir Henry Carmichael had begged him with an urgency that bordered upon terror. Yet now that he was here, aboard this floating palace of teak and polished brass that plied its leisurely way from Matadi toward Stanleyville, Poirot felt the familiar tingling of the hunter. Somewhere among these languid passengers, murder was preparing its entrance. Captain Arthur Hastings, pink and perspiring in his white dinner jacket, arrived at his elbow clutching 2 long glasses that sweated even more freely than he did. "I say, Poirot," he panted, "beastly hot, what? One feels one is being gently poached inside one's own skin. Here, try a gin sling. The barman swears it's the only thing that keeps an Englishman vertical in these latitudes." Poirot accepted the glass with a fastidious nod, tasted it, and permitted himself the smallest grimace. "It is tolerable, Hastings, but tell me, have you observed our fellow travellers? Observe them well, for among them walks the person who, within the next few days, intends to send Sir Henry Carmichael to his ancestors." Hastings nearly dropped his drink. "Good Lord! You mean the old boy really wasn't exaggerating in his letters?" "No, mon ami. Sir Henry is a man accustomed to facing lions, cannibals, and fever with equanimity. When he trembles, it is not from malaria." At that moment, as if summoned by the mention of his name, Sir Henry Carmichael appeared on the companionway. He was a magnificent ruin of a man, 6'3", shoulders like an ox, skin burned the colour of mahogany, and a white beard that swept his chest like a lion's mane. Even at 65, his eyes blazed with the same restless fire that had carried him across unmapped deserts and into forbidden cities. Around his neck, pinned to the crimson cummerbund of his mess jacket, glittered the famous emerald scarab of Mwene Mutapa, a stone the size of a pigeon's egg, carved into the shape of a beetle, its wings veined with gold older than the pharaohs. 20 passengers turned instinctively toward him as he strode across the deck. Conversation faltered, then resumed in a lower key. Sir Henry possessed that rarest of qualities, presence. He raised a hand in greeting, and the gesture had something imperial about it. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice rolled out like a drum. "Tonight, after dinner, I shall deliver my long-promised lecture upon the lost kingdom of the Luba. And I shall reveal, for the first time in public, the secret that certain powerful persons have tried to silence with bullets, poison, and gold. I do not believe in curses, but I do believe in greed. And greed, my friends, has followed me onto this very boat." A ripple of excitement passed through the little crowd. Poirot's eyes, bright as blackcurrants, moved from face to face, cataloguing every flicker of emotion. Closest to Sir Henry stood his hostess, Mrs. Rosalind Otterbourne, the romantic novelist whose lurid tales of passion among the pyramids had scandalized London drawing-rooms. She was already more than a little drunk. Her painted mouth trembled between fear and exhilaration. Beside her lounged her daughter Rosalie, a slim, dark girl with the weary eyes of one who has seen too much of her mother's indiscretions. Rosalie's gaze, however, was fixed not upon Sir Henry, but upon a young man leaning negligently against the rail some 20 feet away. Mr. Simon Doyle, tall, bronzed, impossibly handsome, and Poirot noted with interest, newly married to the richest heiress in England. Lynette Doyle herself was a vision, 20 years old, golden-haired, dressed in white chiffon that clung to her perfect body like mist. She was laughing at something her husband whispered, but the laughter did not reach her eyes. Those eyes, large and violet, kept darting toward a table in the shadows, where a single woman sat alone, smoking cigarette after cigarette with savage intensity. Jacqueline de Belfort. Even the name sounded dangerous. Small, dark, vivacious, with the mouth of a child and the eyes of a panther. Once she had been Lynette's dearest friend. Once she had been engaged to Simon Doyle. Now she followed them across Europe and Africa like a sleek and vengeful shadow. The scandal had been in every newspaper from Cairo to the Cape. Poirot sipped his gin and permitted himself a small sigh of satisfaction. What a bouquet of human passions! Jealousy, greed, terror, and the oldest motive of all, revenge. A steward in spotless white glided past bearing a tray of champagne. Behind him moved a taller figure. Colonel Johnny, race, lean, sunburned, silent. Race had been with British intelligence in the war and had never entirely left it. He met Poirot's glance and inclined his head a fraction. "I am watching too." From the lower deck came the sudden throb of native drums and the high, ululating cry of women. The ship's captain, a phlegmatic Belgian, had arranged a performance of Congolese dancing for the entertainment of his distinguished passengers. Already a space was being cleared near the funnel. Sir Henry laughed heartily. "Excellent! A little local colour before I reveal truths that certain gentlemen in Brussels and Leopoldville would prefer remained buried with the bones of my porters." Dr. Ludwig Bessner, the Austrian anthropologist who had accompanied 3 of Sir Henry's expeditions, turned pale beneath his tan. He was a heavy-set man with a bullet head and small, angry eyes behind thick spectacles. His hands, Poirot noticed, were never still. "Mein Herr," Bessner said thickly, "some truths are better left in the grave. There are things that happened in the Luba country in 1928 that will be revealed tonight." Sir Henry cut him off with a roar of laughter that held no mirth whatsoever. Mr. Andrew Pennington, Lynette Doyle's American trustee, a large man with the watchful eyes of a professional gambler, hastily changed the subject by proposing a toast to the explorer's health. Glasses were raised. Jacqueline de Belfort lifted hers last of all, and her smile was a blade. "To Sir Henry Carmichael," she said softly, "and to everything he deserves." Dinner was announced. The passengers moved toward the saloon in a rustle of silk and a murmur of speculation. Poirot lingered, watching the emerald scarab flash-green fire as Sir Henry turned away. For an instant the great explorer's mask slipped, and Poirot saw raw fear in those leonine eyes. As the little detective followed the others below, the drums from the lower deck grew louder, more insistent, until they seemed to beat inside the blood. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the rail, a night bird screamed once and was still. In the richly panelled saloon, crystal and silver glittered beneath electric fans that stirred the air without cooling it. Sir Henry took his place at the captain's table, the scarab brooch blazing against his crimson cummerbund like a drop of poisoned blood. Conversation flowed like the river outside, bright on the surface, treacherous beneath. Poirot, seated between Mrs. Otterbourne, who was already well into the champagne, and young Rosalie, who touched neither wine nor food, listened more than he spoke. He heard the American trustee discussing investments in Congo rubber with forced heartiness. He heard Simon Doyle's too loud laughter and Linnet's quick intake of breath each time Jacqueline's name was mentioned. He heard Dr. Bessner's heavy breathing and the faint clink of the ice in Colonel Race's glass that never seemed to empty. At 11 o'clock the tables were cleared. Native stewards in crimson fezzes wheeled in a magic lantern and screen. The passengers settled into wicker chairs. The drums from the lower deck ceased abruptly, leaving a silence so complete that the creaking of the ship sounded like bones rubbing together. Sir Henry rose. The scarab caught the light and threw a green spark across the ceiling. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "tonight I shall take you where no white man has returned alive in 8 years." At that precise instant, from the darkness of the lower deck, a single native dancer appeared in the doorway. He wore leopard skins and a mask of blackened wood carved into the face of a devil. In his right hand, he carried a ceremonial spear. Slowly, with a grace that was almost terrible, he began to dance towards the explorer, whirling closer and closer, the drums thundering again as though the heart of Africa itself had entered the room. Sir Henry smiled indulgently and held out one hand as if to receive a tribute. The dancer knelt. For one heartbeat the leopard skin brushed the explorer's knees. A flash of green fire as the scarab seemed to flare like a living thing. Then Sir Henry Carmichael gasped. His hand flew to his throat. The great beard quivered. He took one stumbling step forward, eyes starting from his head in accusation and incredulity. The emerald scarab fell from his cravat and rang once upon the polished floor. Sir Henry followed it, crashing face down among the shattered coffee cups, quite dead. In the frozen silence that followed, Hercule Poirot heard only 2 sounds: the frantic beating of the drums and the soft, almost tender laughter of Jacqueline de Belfort. Chapter 2. The Poisoned Scarab. The saloon of the SS Karnak had become a tableau vivant of horror. Electric fans still whirred overhead, stirring the warm air into languid spirals, but no one moved. Sir Henry Carmichael lay on his face amid scattered coffee cups and shards of a Sèvres saucer. The great white beard spread like a bloodless wound across the teak floor. The emerald scarab lay 3 feet away, glittering malevolently, as though the beetle itself had crawled from his throat in search of new flesh. Hercule Poirot was the first to break the spell. With the neatness that characterized all his movements, he stepped forward, knelt, and placed 2 gloved fingers against the explorer's carotid. The skin was already cooling beneath the tropical night. "Il est mort," he announced quietly. Death was almost instantaneous. A woman screamed, Mrs. Otterbourne clutching her daughter as though the girl were a lifebelt. Simon Doyle swore under his breath and reached instinctively for Linnet's hand. Linnet herself stood frozen, violet eyes enormous, one palm pressed to her lips. Only Jacqueline de Belfort remained seated, cigarette burning forgotten between her fingers, a faint smile curving the corners of her mouth as though she were savouring a private joke. Colonel Race's voice cut through the rising babble like a machete. "No one is to leave this room. Captain Rolfson, steal the companionways. Every soul aboard remains under suspicion until Monsieur Poirot says otherwise." The Belgian captain, a stout man with a face the colour of uncooked pork, nodded and began barking orders in Flemish. Stewards appeared as if by magic and stationed themselves at every exit. Poirot, still kneeling, had produced a silk handkerchief and a small electric torch. He lifted Sir Henry's head with surprising gentleness, turning it so that the light fell full upon the throat. There, just above the collar stud, was a single crimson puncture, no larger than a pinprick, already blackening at the edges. "Regardez," he murmured to Hastings, who had gone green but stood his ground manfully. "A hypodermic would leave a larger bruise. This is the work of something far more delicate." Hastings swallowed. "Poisoned arrow, like the natives use? Précisément, and yet not. Observe." With the handkerchief, Poirot deftly unpinned the crimson cummerbund. The back of the great emerald scarab was revealed. A hollow gold cavity where the pin should have been solid. Instead, the pin itself was a slender steel needle, no longer than a dressmaker's, now bent and dark with dried blood. "Mon Dieu," Poirot breathed. "The brooch itself was the weapon. Someone coated the pin with poison and knew that Sir Henry wore it every evening, directly over the carotid artery, a scratch merely, and death within seconds." Dr. Ludwig Bessner pushed forward, spectacles flashing. "Permit me, Herr Poirot. I am a medical man." Poirot inclined his head with exquisite courtesy and made room. Bessner knelt heavily, sniffed at the explorer's lips, then delicately touched the tiny wound. "Curare," he pronounced at once, "but not the crude extract of the Indians. This is refined, crystalline. My own formula, in fact, published in the Vienna Zeitschrift 4 years ago. Rapid paralysis of the respiratory muscles. The heart stops from lack of oxygen. Exquisite." He seemed almost to admire the handiwork. Poirot's eyes glittered. "You recognize your own child, Docteur?" Bessner flushed darkly. "I recognize science, yeah, but half a dozen laboratories in Europe could synthesize this compound." Colonel Race had retrieved the scarab with a clean handkerchief. He held it to the light. "The pin is sprung. Someone bent it deliberately so that the least pressure would drive it into the flesh. When did Sir Henry last wear this thing?" "Every evening since we left Matadi," Linnet Doyle said, in a voice that trembled only slightly. "He was superstitious about it. Said it was his luck." "Luck," Jacqueline de Bellefort repeated softly, and laughed once, a sound like breaking glass. Poirot rose and addressed the room. "Mesdames et messieurs, we have a murder most ingenious. The dancer who approached Sir Henry at the climax of his lecture. Did anyone observe his hands?" Rosalie Otterbourne spoke for the first time, low and clear. "I did. He touched the cummerbund, only for an instant, like a tribute. And then he vanished, back through that door." She pointed to the starboard companionway that led to the lower deck. Poirot turned to the captain. "The dancer, where is he?" Captain Rolfson looked suddenly unwell. "He was hired in Matadi, a local man. After the performance, the crew were to pay him and put him ashore at the wood station. But the boat that was to take him has not returned." A ripple of unease swept the saloon. Hastings burst out, "You mean the blighters loose on the river?" "Or," Poirot said quietly, "he never left the Karnak at all." At that moment, a steward appeared, face the colour of ash. He whispered something to Colonel Race. Race's expression hardened. "Gentlemen," he said, "perhaps you would step outside." Poirot, Race, Hastings and Dr. Bessner followed the steward down the companionway to the lower deck. The moon had set. Only the riding lights cast a sickly glow over the water. Something dark floated against the hull, bumping gently with the current. The steward lowered a boat hook. The body rolled over. It was the dancer. His throat had been cut from ear to ear. The leopard skin loincloth was soaked black. One hand still clutched a torn playing card, the Queen of Spades, its face smeared with river mud and blood. Poirot stared at the corpse for a long moment. "So," he said at last, "our assassin tidies up loose ends with efficiency. First the victim, then the instrument. But why the Queen of Spades? A calling card, perhaps? Or a message?" Dr. Bessner was already examining the body with professional detachment. "Dead 2 hours at least. The cut is savage, right-handed from behind. But see here," he parted the matted hair at the base of the skull, revealing a second, smaller wound. "Another puncture, same poison. He was paralyzed first, then the throat cut to make it look like native vengeance." Hastings shuddered. "Good God! The murderer took no chances." Poirot's gaze swept the empty deck. "He took one chance. He left the dancer's body where it would be found. He wishes us to believe this is ritual murder, a curse of the Emerald Scarab. But Hercule Poirot is not superstitious." Colonel Race lit a cigarette with steady fingers. "The native crew are terrified. Half of them believe the scarab really is cursed. We may have a panic on our hands. Then we must move quickly." Poirot turned to the captain. "Every passenger is to be searched, cabins also. The poison, the knife, perhaps even the dancer's mask, all must be somewhere aboard." The search began at once. Stewards, under Race's direction, moved methodically from cabin to cabin. Passengers were herded into the smoking room and watched like suspicious school children. Poirot himself, accompanied by reluctant Hastings, began with Sir Henry's suite. It was a chaos of maps, photographs, and tribal artifacts. On the desk lay the explorer's journal, bound in green leather, open to a page headed Luba Expedition 1928, Private. Poirot read aloud, "They will never forgive me for what I took, B knows. One day he will come for the scarab, and for me." Hastings whistled. "B? That wouldn't be Bessner, would it?" "Possibly." Poirot closed the journal, but many men have initials B, and many more have reason to hate Sir Henry Carmichael. In the wardrobe, they found something that made even Poirot pause. A second leopard skin loincloth, folded neatly, and beneath it a native mask, identical to the dancer's, still smelling of fresh palm oil. Hastings stared. So the dancer never left the ship. Someone dressed as him. "Exactly, mon ami. Our murderer is one of the 20 Europeans on this boat, and he, or she, is still among us." From the corridor came a sudden commotion. Colonel Race appeared in the doorway, holding a small glass vial stoppered with red wax. "Found this hidden in the lining of Dr. Bessner's medical bag," he said grimly. "Labelled in German, crystalline curare, pure enough to kill a regiment." Dr. Bessner, summoned at once, turned first white, then purple. "That is mine, yes. I carry it for research into arrow poisons. But someone has used half the contents. I swear by all that is holy." Poirot raised a hand. "We shall see, Docteur. We shall see." Midnight had come and gone. The SS Karnak drifted on the Black River, engines silent, every light blazing like a challenge to the darkness. In the smoking room, the passengers sat in strained groups, speaking in whispers, each watching the others with the wary eyes of trapped animals. Jacqueline de Belfort alone seemed unaffected. She sat at the bar, oil, swirling brandy in a balloon glass, humming a little French song under her breath. Poirot paused beside her. You are not afraid, mademoiselle?" "Afraid?" She smiled, showing small, sharp teeth. "Monsieur Poirot, I have been afraid for months. Tonight, for the first time, I feel free." And she lifted her glass in a silent toast to the corpse that lay in the improvised mortuary 2 decks below. Far away in the jungle, a lion roared once, a sound of pure hunger that carried across the water and into the heart of every listener. The game, Poirot reflected, as he mounted the companionway to begin his interrogations, had only just begun. And somewhere on this boat, the murderer was already planning the next move. Chapter 3. The Dead Dancer. Dawn crept over the Congo like a guilty thing, pale gold and hesitant, as though the sun itself were reluctant to look upon the SS Karnak. The river had widened during the night. On either side, the forest stood in solid walls of green blackness, broken only by the occasional flash of a kingfisher or the slow, sinister glide of a crocodile. The steamer lay motionless, anchored in midstream, waiting for the mist to lift before the engines could throb again. A smell of wet earth and decay rose from the water, mingling with the sharper odours of coffee and kerosene from the galley. On the lower deck, the dancer's body had been laid out on a tarpaulin. Native crewmen, barefooted and silent, kept a respectful distance, their eyes wide with terror. The leopard-skin loincloth had been folded back. The great gash across the throat gaped like a second, obscene mouth. Someone had closed the dead eyes, but the lips were still drawn back in a grimace of agony or astonishment. Hercule Poirot stood at the head of the corpse, hands clasped behind his back, head cocked to one side like a fastidious bird. Captain Hastings hovered nearby, trying not to look at the wound and failing miserably. Colonel Race leaned against the rail, cigarette burning unheeded between his fingers. Poirot bent closer. "Observe, mes amis, the cut is deep, but not frenzied. One stroke from left to right with considerable force. The blade was extremely sharp, probably a razor or a surgical scalpel. And see," he indicated the playing card still clutched in the dead man's fist, the Queen of Spades. "In certain circles she is known as the Black Lady, the card of misfortune, of vengeance, of widows. Someone wishes us to believe this is a ritual execution." Hastings swallowed. The natives, Poirot interrupted gently, "do not play European cards, mon cher Hastings, and they do not use crystalline curare refined in a Viennese laboratory. No, this is theatre. Very well staged, but theatre all the same." Dr. Bessner arrived, carrying his black bag. He had changed into a white drill suit that made him look larger and more bear-like than ever. His face was puffy from lack of sleep, the eyes behind the thick lenses red-rimmed. "With permission," he rumbled, kneeling heavily. He worked in silence for several minutes, probing, sniffing, muttering in German. At last he sat back on his heels. Time of death between 1 and 3 in the morning. The throat was cut post-mortem, perhaps 20 minutes after death. Cause of death? Respiratory paralysis induced by the same alkaloid that killed Sir Henry. A smaller dose, but sufficient. There is also bruising at the back of the neck. Someone held him from behind while the poison was administered. Then the theatrical flourish with the knife. Race crushed out his cigarette. So the dancer was the murderer's tool, and once the tool had served its purpose, it was destroyed. "Exactly," Poirot said. "But why leave the body to be found? Why not weight it and sink it in the river? Because the murderer needs us to be frightened. He needs suspicion to scatter like seed upon fertile ground." A steward approached, saluted nervously, and handed Poirot a folded square of paper. It had been found pinned beneath the dancer's body with a thorn. Poirot unfolded it carefully. Written in capitals with a soft pencil were the words, "The Scarab claims its own. One down, more to follow." Hastings read over his shoulder and gave a low whistle. "Good Lord! The Bounder's declaring war!" Or, Poirot murmured, "Someone wishes us to believe he is." At that moment, a scream shattered the morning stillness. High, hysterical, unmistakably English. It came from the upper deck. They ran. Mrs. Otterbourne stood outside her cabin door in a peach silk dressing gown, one hand pressed to her bosom, the other pointing inside with a trembling finger. Rosalie tried to pull her mother away, but the older woman was beyond reason. "He was here!" Mrs. Otterbourne shrieked. "In the night, a black man with a knife, covered in blood. He stood over my bed and laughed. I saw the Queen of Spades in his hand." Poirot entered the cabin swiftly. The air was heavy with the scent of violet, brilliantine, and gin. On the counterpane lay a single playing card, the Queen of Spades, identical to the one found on the dancer. Rosalie Otterbourne's voice was low, furious. "She's been drinking since dawn. She saw nothing. Someone is playing cruel tricks." Poirot picked up the card with his handkerchief. "Perhaps, perhaps not. But tricks can kill as surely as bullets, mademoiselle." Mrs. Otterbourne collapsed into a chair, sobbing, "I know too much. That's why he came for me. Sir Henry told me everything about the expedition, the gold, the men he left to die in the bush. I was going to put it all in my new novel, The Scarlet Sin of the Congo. He begged me not to, but I refused hush money." Poirot's eyebrows rose like drawn bows. "You refused Sir Henry Carmichael? That was courageous." "Or foolish," Rosalie said bitterly. "Mother, you will say nothing more until you are sober." But Mrs. Otterbourne was beyond caution. There were letters in his cabin, proof that Dr. Bessner was cheated of his share, cheated and abandoned when the fever took him. Sir Henry stole the credit, the glory, the emerald scarab itself. Bessner swore one day he would have his revenge. Dr. Bessner, who had followed them up, went very still. "Gnädige Frau," he said in a voice like gravel, "you repeat drunken gossip. I was ill, yes. Sir Henry saved my life by carrying me 80 miles to the mission. I owed him everything." "Saved your life?" Mrs. Otterbourne laughed shrilly. "That's not what your own diary said, Doctor. I saw it. Sir Henry showed me." "Bessner will kill me for this," he wrote. "The scarab is cursed with my blood." The cabin seemed suddenly airless. Colonel Race's eyes narrowed. "Mrs. Otterbourne, where exactly did you see this diary?" "In his desk, last night before the lecture. He was showing me photographs, ghastly things, skulls and such like, and the diary was open. I read it while he poured drinks. Then that dancer came in and—" She stopped, eyes wide, as though seeing the scene again. Poirot pounced. "The dancer entered Sir Henry's cabin before the lecture?" "Yes, just for a moment. Sir Henry gave him a tip, folded note, and sent him away. Said something about the performance must be perfect tonight." Silence fell, heavy as the mist outside. Hastings broke it. "So Sir Henry himself may have arranged for the dancer to approach him. Part of the show! And someone turned the show into murder." Poirot nodded slowly. "Someone who knew the programme intimately." At 10 o'clock the passengers were assembled in the smoking room. The atmosphere was poisonous. Accusations floated like smoke. Simon Doyle's hand trembled as he lit one cigarette from the butt of another. Lynette sat very straight, hands clenched in her lap, refusing to look at Jacqueline, who lounged in a corner smiling her small, dangerous smile. Mr. Pennington, the American trustee, mopped his bald head continually. "This is intolerable. We are civilized people, not characters in one of Mrs. Otterbourne's trashy novels." Mrs. Otterbourne bridled. Trashy. My last book sold 100,000 copies, Mr. Pennington, while you— Ladies, gentlemen, Poirot interrupted smoothly. Recriminations will not bring back the dead. But facts— facts are another matter. Fact 1. Sir Henry feared assassination and invited me aboard to prevent it. Fact 2. He was killed by his own talisman, in full view of 20 witnesses. Fact 3. The native dancer, who may or may not have been an innocent pawn, is now himself dead and arranged like a stage corpse. Fact 4. Someone among us knows far more about the Luber expedition of 1928 than has yet been admitted. He let the silence stretch until it was unbearable. Colonel Race spoke quietly. The captain has agreed to hold position here until the wireless reaches Stanleyville. A river gunboat is being dispatched with police. Until then, no one leaves the Karnak. A murmur of protest rose. Jacqueline de Belfort laughed softly. A floating prison! How very appropriate! Poirot turned to her. You find imprisonment amusing, mademoiselle? I find everything amusing tonight, monsieur. Did you know that Sir Henry lent Simon £40,000 on condition that Simon never married Lynette? When we broke our engagement, the debt was cancelled. Now Sir Henry is dead, and the debt dies with him. Curious, n'est-ce pas? Simon Doyle sprang to his feet, face livid. You lying little— Lynette caught his arm. Simon, don't. She wants you to strike her. That's what she's always wanted. Jacqueline's eyes glittered with tears or triumph. It was impossible to tell which. Poirot watched them all, the little grey cells dancing. At noon the heat became infernal. Passengers retreated to their cabins or sat listlessly beneath awnings, sipping warm drinks and eyeing one another like hostile strangers. Poirot retired to the small writing-room and began to make notes in his neat continental hand. Motive, revenge, Bessner. Motive, gain, Simon Doyle, Pennington. Motive, fear of exposure, Mrs. Otterbourne. Motive, jealousy, Jacqueline. Opportunity, anyone who could impersonate the dancer or bribe him. He underlined the last line twice. As the afternoon wore on, a new sound intruded upon the torpor, the steady splash of oars. A large native canoe appeared round the bend, paddled by 6 sweating men. In the stern sat a Belgian official in wilted white uniform, revolver prominent on his hip. The police had arrived sooner than expected. But before the canoe reached the accommodation ladder, a single shot cracked out from the upper deck, Mrs. Otterbourne's cabin. Poirot ran, the others pounding behind him. The cabin door stood ajar. Inside, Mrs. Otterbourne lay on the floor in a widening lake of crimson. A neat bullet hole in the exact centre of her forehead. In her right hand, she still clutched the Queen of Spades. And on the bulkhead, scrawled in fresh blood, were the words, "The Scarab never forgets." The hunt had claimed its second victim, and the SS Karnak drifted helplessly in the heart of darkness, while somewhere in its polished corridors, the murderer reloaded. Chapter 4. The Impossible Shot. The SS Karnak rocked gently on the sluggish current, but inside Mrs. Otterbourne's cabin, the air was rigid with shock. Blood, still warm, had soaked into the pale Kashmiri rug and spread in a dark, perfect circle around the dead woman's head. She lay on her back, eyes wide to the deckhead, the Queen of Spades crushed between her stiffening fingers as though she had tried to ward off the bullet with a playing card. A single hole, no larger than a sixpence, sat precisely between her brows. There was very little powder burning. The shot had been fired from a distance. Hercule Poirot stood in the doorway, motionless, taking in every detail with the rapidity of a camera shutter. Colonel Race knelt beside the body, 2 fingers pressed to the carotid out of habit rather than hope. Captain Hastings hovered behind Poirot, white as ship's paint. "Instantaneous," Race said quietly. "Small caliber, probably 25 or 22, and look at the angle, straight down, almost perpendicular. She was standing when she was hit." Poirot stepped carefully around the blood and examined the porthole. It was open no more than 6 inches, the brass catch still fastened. The glass was intact. Outside, the river slid past, 30 feet of green water between the hull and the nearest wall of papyrus and mangrove. Mid-afternoon sun blazed on the water. Heat shimmer made the forest dance. "Impossible," Hastings whispered. "No one could fire through that gap at that angle. The bullet would have to turn a corner." "Yet it did not turn a corner," Poirot replied. "Observe the bulkhead opposite." A neat hole pierced the thin wood at head height, and behind it the spent bullet had buried itself in a copy of Mrs. Otterbourne's own novel, The Passionate Palms of Pharaoh. "Entry from the porthole, exit into the wall. The trajectory is almost perfectly level for the first 6 inches, then drops. Curious," Dr. Bessner lumbered in, breathing like a walrus. "Mein Gott, another one! Permit me!" He knelt, sniffed, peered. Powder grains on the forehead, none. Distance at least 3 meters. And the wound canal sloped slightly downward. She was looking up when the shot was fired. Race rose. "The porthole is barely wide enough for a man's fist. A rifle barrel would never fit." "Yet a pistol might," Poirot said, "if the barrel were slender and the marksman exceptionally steady." He leaned out. The brass rim of the porthole was smeared with fresh green paint where something had scraped it. "And our marksman rested his weapon here, on the sill. See, the paint is transferred to this." He produced with a conjurer's flourish a tiny flake of green on his handkerchief, the exact shade used on the ship's lifeboats. Hastings gaped. "But the lifeboats are slung 20 feet above the water, on the boat deck. No one could fire from there into this porthole. The angle is all wrong." "Précisément," Poirot murmured. "All wrong. Therefore, the angle was made right, by someone who understands geometry better than anatomy." Colonel Race's face was grim. "The Belgian police canoe is still an hour away. We are on our own." They searched the cabin with methodical ferocity. In Mrs. Otterbourne's handbag, they found a crumpled letter in Sir Henry Carmichael's handwriting, dated only 3 days earlier. "My dear Salome, keep silent about the Luba business, and the $5,000 is yours the moment we reach Stanleyville. Speak, and you will regret it for the rest of your life, which may prove lamentably short." H.C. Rosalie Otterbourne read it over Poirot's shoulder and gave a small, broken laugh. "So that is what Mother meant by hush money. She was boasting this morning that she had refused it. She wanted 10,000 and the dedication in his next book." Poirot folded the letter carefully. "Your mother, mademoiselle, possessed the dangerous combination of a vivid imagination and a weak head for gin. She believed herself invincible because her scandals were printed between crimson covers. Alas, some scandals are printed in blood." Race sealed the cabin and posted 2 armed stewards outside. The passengers were summoned once more to the smoking room. The atmosphere had turned sulphurous. Mr. Pennington complained loudly about jungle justice. Simon Doyle drank brandy as though it were water. Lynette sat like a marble statue. Jacqueline de Belfort examined her manicure with elaborate unconcern. Poirot took the centre of the rug and spoke with quiet authority. "Mesdames et messieurs, we have now to murders, and one attempted impersonation. The dancer was poisoned, then throat cut for theatrical effect. Mrs. Otterbourne was shot by a bullet that apparently defied the laws of physics. Someone among us is a killer of considerable ingenuity and considerable desperation. I propose to discover who that person is before the Congo itself provides a third grave. He paused, letting the fan stir the heavy silence. First, the weapon. Race produced a small bundle wrapped in oilskin. Inside lay a .25 automatic pistol, nickel-plated, pearl-handled, an elegant lady's weapon. Found 10 minutes ago wedged behind the ventilator in Mr. Belfort's cabin. A collective gasp. Jacqueline did not even look up. "Yes, it is mine," she said calmly. "I bought it in Cairo after Simone jilted me." One never knows when a girl may need protection on a honeymoon cruise. Seaman Doyle surged to his feet. "You damned! Sit down, Monsieur Doyle," Poirot said sharply. "Mademoiselle de Belfort has just provided herself with the perfect answer. Everyone on board knew she carried a pistol. To use it would be insane." "Exactly," Jacqueline said, and for the first time her voice shook. "I am many things, Monsieur Poirot, but I am not a fool." Race turned the pistol over. "One round fired. The bullet we recovered from the wall matches." Poirot took the weapon, sniffed the barrel, examined the breech, fired recently, within the hour, and yet he held it to the light. "Observe the scratches on the plating. This pretty toy has been used as a tool, not a weapon. Someone forced the porthole catch with it, perhaps." He laid the pistol down and produced something else. A length of thin copper wire, bent at one end into a tiny hook, at the other fastened to a child's red wooden reel. "This," he said, "was recovered from the scuppers directly beneath Mrs. Otterbourne's porthole, and this," he opened his palm to reveal a single .25 cartridge case, bright and new, was floating beside it. Hastings stared. "Good Lord, Poirot! Are you saying the shot was fired from below the porthole? From the river itself?" "From the river, yes, but not by a swimmer. Observe." He took the copper wire and deftly fashioned a miniature catapult with the reel as fulcrum. "A pocket pistol, a length of fishing line, a counterweight. Any clever schoolboy could construct such a thing. The pistol is tied beneath the porthole, muzzle angled upward. The trigger is pulled by a string from the deck above or the deck below. The recoil sends the weapon overboard. The wire and reel follow. Only the cartridge case remains to drift harmlessly away. Childishly simple and completely silent." A stunned silence greeted this demonstration. Mr. Pennington mopped his streaming face. "But who could think of such a devilish contraption?" "Someone familiar with firearms," Race said slowly, "and with fishing. Someone who has spent years in wild country improvising solutions." Every eye turned toward the one man who fitted that description perfectly. Colonel Johnny Race himself. Race met the stares without flinching. "Yes, I could have built it. I have built similar devices to take man-eating tigers without alarming a village. But I did not murder a drunken novelist, nor did I poison Sir Henry Carmichael." Poirot inclined his head. "Of that I am convinced, mon colonel, because the murderer made one tiny error." He produced a third object. A scrap of crimson silk, no larger than a postage stamp, caught on the jagged edge of the porthole rim. "This," he said softly, "is torn from a scarf. A very distinctive scarf worn last night by only one person aboard this ship." He turned. Jacqueline de Belfort was no longer smiling. The scrap of silk exactly matched the scarf knotted loosely at her throat. She touched it with fingers that did not tremble. "Yes, it is mine. I lost it sometime this morning. Someone is trying very hard to make me the scapegoat. Or, Poirot said gently, someone is trying to make it appear that someone is trying to make you the scapegoat. Layers within layers, like the skins of an onion. He turned to the assembly. For the moment, no one will leave this room. Colonel Race will search every cabin again. This time we look not for a pistol, but for fishing line, for copper wire, for a child's reel painted red, and for wet clothing. As Race and the stewards moved off, Poirot drew Hastings aside. Mon ami, the pace quickens. 2 dead in 24 hours. The murderer grows nervous. Nervous murderers make mistakes. And the next mistake will be fatal. To the murderer. Far down the river, the throb of a gunboat's engines became audible at last, growing steadily louder. Help was coming. But on the SS Karnak, locked in the green heart of Africa, the passengers looked at one another with the eyes of the damned, and knew that help would arrive far too late to prevent a third death. From somewhere forward came the sudden, shocking sound of a splash. Something heavy striking the water and sinking swiftly out of sight. Poirot's head snapped round. "The murderer," he said quietly, "has just disposed of the evidence." And before anyone could stop her, Jacqueline de Belfort slipped through the doorway and vanished into the blazing sunlight of the deck. Chapter 5. The Shadow in the Water. The splash still echoed in Poirot's ears as he reached the rail. The river was a sheet of hammered bronze under the late afternoon sun. Whatever had been thrown was already swallowed. Only a few lazy bubbles rose, then nothing. Jacqueline de Belfort was nowhere on the promenade deck. A single crimson scarf fluttered from the lowest rung of the ladder that led to the baggage deck below, like a drop of blood against the white paint. Poirot descended swiftly, Hastings clattering behind him. They found her on the narrow strip of deck above the churning paddle wheel. She stood very still, hands gripping the rail, staring down into the brown water as though hypnotized. The wind pressed her thin frock against her body. She looked small, breakable, and infinitely dangerous. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said softly, "it is not wise to be alone at this moment." She did not turn. "I wanted to see what he threw away. The last piece of the puzzle, perhaps." Her voice was steady, almost amused. "But the river keeps its secrets, doesn't it, Monsieur Poirot?" "Rivers always give up their dead in time," he replied, "and their evidence." Colonel Race appeared at the head of the ladder, revolver in hand. Behind him, 2 stewards dragged a heavy wicker hamper. Dripping river water. The lid had burst open. Inside lay a sodden leopard skin loincloth, a broken native mask split down the middle, and a child's red fishing reel tangled with copper wire and monofilament line. Race's face was stone, found wedged under the paddle box. Whoever tossed it was in a hurry. The hamper caught on the guardrail and tore free. Jacqueline laughed, a low, bitter sound. "So the dancer's costume returns. How very theatrical." Poirot knelt, examining the mask with care. The inside was stained with fresh blood and a smear of European face paint, grease paint the colour Dr. Bessner used to protect his nose from the sun. He rose slowly. Someone disguised himself as the dancer a second time to dispose of these things. Someone tall, strong, sunburned. Simon Doyle's voice came from the ladder. "That could be half the men on board, including me." He had followed them down, Lynette clinging to his arm, her face chalk white. Poirot regarded them thoughtfully. "Including you, yes, Monsieur Doyle. You were on deck alone 5 minutes ago. You smoke Turkish cigarettes. The butts we found near the paddle box have a gold crescent band. Yours, I believe." Simon flushed crimson. "I went for air. I threw nothing overboard." "Yet something was thrown," Poirot said, "and someone wished Mademoiselle de Belfort to be seen here, alone, immediately after the splash. Another layer of the onion." He turned to Race. "Colonel, the gunboat will be here within the hour. Until then, every passenger must remain in sight of at least 2 others, no exceptions." Night fell with equatorial suddenness. The sky turned from brass to indigo. The first stars appeared like thrown diamonds. Lanterns were lit along the decks. The Karnak became a floating island of yellow light, surrounded by blackness that pressed close enough to touch. In the smoking room, the passengers sat in a tense circle, watched by armed stewards. Conversation had died. Only the fans whirred, and the river lapped against the hull like a restless animal. Poirot stood before them, small and implacable. "Tonight," he said, "someone attempted to destroy the last evidence linking the murders. The attempt failed. Tomorrow the Belgian police will take charge. But before they arrive, I will give the murderer one chance, one only, to confess privately and throw himself upon the mercy of the law." No one moved. No one spoke. "Very well." Poirot's voice was almost sorrowful. "Then the game continues." He stepped closer to Dr. Bessner, who sat sweating into his brandy. "Doctor, you told us Sir Henry saved your life in 1938, yet Mrs. Otterbourne claimed to have seen your diary stating the opposite. A diary, curiously, that has now vanished along with Sir Henry's own journal." Bessner's jowls trembled. "Lies! All lies from a drunken woman. Perhaps. Yet the grease paint inside the mask matches the tin in your cabin, and the curare is missing half its contents," Bessner roared. "Someone steals from me to cast suspicion." Poirot turned to Simon Doyle. "And you, monsieur, profit enormously from Sir Henry's death. £40,000 of debt erased. Your wife's trustee, Mr. Pennington, was seen entering Sir Henry's cabin at midnight, perhaps to negotiate new terms?" Pennington leapt up. "That's a damned lie. I was playing bridge." "Bridge," Poirot repeated softly, "can provide an alibi, or destroy one." He moved to Jacqueline. "And you, mademoiselle, have made no secret of your hatred for everyone connected with your broken engagement. You carry a pistol. You lose scarves in convenient places. You appear at dramatic moments." Jacqueline met his gaze steadily. "I have wanted people dead, monsieur. I have not killed them." Poirot sighed. "Then we are all innocent, and 2 people are still dead." At that moment, the wireless operator burst in, eyes wide. "Message from the gunboat, sir. They will reach us at dawn. But there is something else." He held out a signal flimsy. "Picked up an SOS from a native village 30 miles upriver. They report a white man, half dead from fever, raving about a green beetle and blood. He claims to have escaped from the Karnak last night." A ripple of pure terror swept the room. Poirot read the message aloud, then folded it with deliberate calm. "So," he said quietly, "the dancer did not die after all. He lives, and he is coming back." Somewhere outside, the Congo night answered with the deep, throbbing laughter of a hyena. Chapter 6. The Return of the Dancer. The hyena's laughter faded into the night, leaving only the lap of water and the distant thrum of insects. On the SS Karnak, every lantern seemed to flicker with unease. The wireless message lay on the table like a death warrant. A white man, fever-ravaged, muttering of green beetles and blood, claiming escape from the steamer itself. Poirot folded the flimsy with precise fingers. "So the dancer lives, or someone wishes us to believe he does. An SOS from a village 30 miles upstream. Convenient timing, n'est-ce pas?" Colonel Race's eyes were slits. The gunboat will investigate at first light. Until then, we double the watches." But the night had other plans. At 2 in the morning, a cry shattered the silence. A native crewman's voice raw with terror. Passengers tumbled from cabins in dressing gowns and pyjamas. Poirot, already dressed, led the rush to the lower deck. A canoe bobbed alongside, roughly lashed to the accommodation ladder. In it lay a man, emaciated, skin blistered by sun and fever, clad only in ragged shorts. His chest heaved, his eyes rolled white. Around his neck hung a crude necklace of lion's teeth, and pinned to it a playing card, the Queen of Spades, sodden but unmistakable. Dr. Bessner knelt at once, forcing quinine between cracked lips. "Malaria, advanced, and exhaustion. He has paddled for hours." The man gasped, clutching Poirot's sleeve. In broken French laced with Swahili. "Le danseur, not dead. They try kill me, for the scarab. Sir Henry, he promised gold, but the white doctor, he poison." Heads turned toward Bessner, who recoiled as though struck. Poirot's voice cut sharp. "Bring him to the saloon. Light, brandy, and no one speaks until I permit it." They carried the dancer, for it was he, alive and raving, into the brightly lit room. Linnet Doyle fetched blankets. Even Jacqueline helped, her face pale but composed. Simon Doyle poured brandy with shaking hands. The dancer gulped it, coughed, then fixed wild eyes on the assembly. "I am Kimbu," he whispered, "from Matadi. Sir Henry hire me for dance, give me coin, say touch the brooch only, make show. But when I kneel, someone behind me, prick in neck, like bee, then darkness." Hastings leaned forward. "You were poisoned, like Sir Henry." Kimbu nodded weakly. "Wake in river, tide in sack, but sack tear on rock. I swim, hide in reeds, see the ship, see the big doctor throw sack again from the dark." Bessner surged up, face purple. "Lies! This savage accuses me. I was in my cabin all night." "Were you?" Poirot murmured. "We shall verify. Continue, Kimbu." "The big doctor. He wear mask, leopard skin. But I know his smell. Carbolic soap, like hospital. He say to another, the fool Otterbourne woman knows too much. Silence her next. Then shoot. I hide below deck, hear all." A gasp rippled through the room. Rosalie Otterbourne buried her face in her hands. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And the journal? Sir Henry's green book?" "Stolen," Kimbu rasped. "By the American, fat man with shiny head. He search cabin after first death. Take papers. Say to wife of handsome man, 'This proves embezzle. Millions.'" Pennington went ashen. "Preposterous! I manage Linnet's affairs honestly." Linnet turned on him, eyes blazing. "You told me everything was secure. If you've been stealing," Simon caught her arm. "Darling, not now." But Jacqueline laughed softly. "Oh, but now is perfect. Secrets bubbling up like river mud." Poirot raised a hand for silence. "Kimbu, you escaped. Why return? To warn? The scarab. It cursed. But not by spirits, by men. The big doctor wants it. For revenge, 1928. Sir Henry, leave him in desert. Take all credit, all gold. Bessner swear oath on ancestors." Bessner lunged, but Race restrained him. "Let the man speak." Kimbu's voice faded to a thread. "I paddle back, to tell, but they see me. Throw spear." He touched a gash on his shoulder, fresh and bleeding. Dr. Bessner examined it professionally despite himself. "Superficial, but infection will set in." Poirot paced, moustache twitching. So many threads. Bessner for revenge, Pennington for embezzlement, Doyle for debt, Mademoiselle de Belfort for love turned to hate, and Mrs. Otterbourne silenced for blackmail. He stopped before Kimbu. "One thing more, the impossible shot. You were below deck, did you see?" Kimbu nodded. "From baggage hold. See string. Like fishing. Pistol tied to rope. Pull from above, then drop in river." "From above," Poirot echoed. "The boat deck. Who was there?" "No one, but Shadow, tall Shadow, with hat, like explorer hat. Sir Henry's safari hat, missing since the murder." Dawn was greying the sky when the gunboat finally nosed alongside, Belgian ensign flapping. Officers swarmed aboard, efficient and brusque. The dancer was carried to the infirmary, statements taken. Poirot conferred privately with the lieutenant. "The man lives, good, but guard him well, he is the only witness." As the police began searches anew, Poirot gathered the passengers on deck. The air smelled of wet earth and coffee. Hippos grunted in the shallows. "The net tightens," he said. "Kimbu's testimony implicates several. But testimony can be bought or faked. The hat, the string, the grease paint. All point, yet none prove." He turned to Bessner. "Docteur, your cabin again. The police will find the missing curare, perhaps?" Bessner sneered. "Search. You find nothing but my innocence." They did find something. In the false bottom of Bessner's trunk, a green leather journal, Sir Henry's own. Pages torn, but enough remained. Entries detailing the 1928 betrayal, Bessner's abandonment, the theft of the scarab. Bessner stared, genuinely baffled. "Not mine! Someone plants!" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Planted, yes, like the pistol in Mademoiselle's cabin, like the scarf at the porthole." He whirled suddenly on Pennington. "And you, monsieur, the embezzlement papers, where are they?" Pennington sweated. "I don't—" A shout from the police lieutenant. In Pennington's mattress, bundles of documents, Linnet's trust siphoned into fake accounts. Linnet gasped. "Andrew, how could you?" But Poirot shook his head. "Too convenient, all of it. The murderer sows confusion like dragon's teeth." Kimbu, bandaged and lucid, was brought on deck. He pointed a trembling finger, not at Bessner, but at Simon Doyle. "Him," he whispered, "the handsome one. He give me the poison brooch. Say, make Sir Henry sleep. But I refuse. Then the big doctor take it." Simon paled. "Liar! I never—" Jacqueline stepped forward, eyes fever-bright. "No, Simon, tell them. Tell how you begged me to shoot Linnet in Egypt, how you planned it all." The deck erupted in chaos. Accusations flew like arrows. Poirot shouted for order. "Enough! The little grey cells demand facts, not frenzy." But in the tumult, no one saw the shadow slip away, until a splash, softer this time, from the stern. Kimbu's eyes widened in terror. "He comes again! The real killer!" And from the river, a voice echoed mockingly. "The scarab claims another." The dancer's canoe was gone, cut adrift, and scrawled on the deck in blood, Queen of Spades. The murderer had struck from the shadows once more, and the Karnak sailed deeper into nightmare. Chapter 7. The Queen of Spades. The blood on the deck was still wet, the letters glistening like fresh paint. Queen of Spades. A native steward crossed himself and backed away, muttering prayers. The sun had barely cleared the forest wall, yet the heat was already ferocious, pressing down on the Karnak like a hot hand. Poirot knelt, touched the writing with a gloved finger, then sniffed. "Fresh blood, human, from Kimbu's shoulder wound, I think. The murderer took a sample while the police bandaged him. A signature, a taunt." Colonel Race's face was iron. "The canoe is gone. Whoever cut it loose is either on the river or still aboard, hiding." The Belgian lieutenant ordered every hatch sealed and a man-by-man search begun. Passengers were herded into the dining saloon under guard. The atmosphere stank of fear and sweat. Poirot stood on a chair so all could see him. "Listen carefully. The killer has now murdered twice, attempted a third, staged disappearances, planted evidence, and written in blood. He enjoys the terror he creates. He believes himself invisible. Today, we prove him wrong. He produced the pack of playing cards found in the dancer's abandoned canoe. Cheap, Belgian-made, the Queen of Spades missing. "Notice," he said, fanning them. "Every queen has a tiny ink mark on the corner. Someone has been marking cards for months, perhaps to cheat at poker, perhaps for another reason. Whose pack is this?" No one answered. Simon Doyle lit another cigarette with shaking fingers. "I play a hand now and then. So do half the men here." "Yet only one man bleeds when pricked," Poirot murmured. He turned to Dr. Bessner. "Doctor, your left thumb. There is a fresh cut." Bessner stared at his hand as if seeing it for the first time. A thin line of blood had welled beneath the nail. "Paper cut, this morning." "Or a cut from a playing card used as a razor," Poirot said softly. Bessner went very still. Lynette Doyle suddenly spoke. Voice brittle. "Stop tormenting everyone. My husband has been half mad since Jacqueline began stalking us. He drinks, he gambles, he could have marked cards, yes, but murder." Jacqueline laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "Thank you, darling Lynette. At last you admit your perfect husband is human. He begged me to kill you in Egypt, remember? Said we would be rich again. When I refused, he found another way." Simon lunged at her. Race and a Belgian sergeant hauled him back. Poirot raised both hands. "Basta! We will have facts, not melodrama," he signalled the lieutenant. 2 policemen escorted Simon Doyle away for formal questioning. Lynette followed, white-faced, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. In the sudden quiet, Rosalie Otterbourne approached Poirot. "Monsieur, there is something you should see. Mother kept souvenirs." She led him to her cabin and produced a small tin box hidden beneath lingerie. Inside, a lock of dark hair tied with red ribbon, a man's gold cufflink engraved SD, and a torn page from Sir Henry's journal, clearly removed after the murder. The page read, "If anything happens to me, suspect SD, he owes me $40,000 and hates his wife more than he loves her. The boy is weak, but weakness can kill as surely as strength." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Your mother stole this?" "She called it insurance," Rosalie whispered. "She was going to blackmail Simon after Sir Henry paid her. That is why she was killed." Poirot folded the page carefully. "Blackmail is a dangerous profession, mademoiselle." Back in the saloon, the search had yielded more. In the ship's cold store, behind crates of tinned butter, police found a bundle. Sir Henry's missing safari hat, stiff with dried blood, a half-empty vial of curare, and a child's red reel with the copper wire catapult still attached. The lieutenant held them up. "Fingerprints will tell us everything." Poirot shook his head almost regretfully. "They will tell us nothing. The murderer has been careful, but the little grey cells do not need fingerprints." He faced the remaining passengers. Bessner, Pennington, Jacqueline, Rosalie, Race. "4 motives now stand clear," he said. "Revenge, Dr. Bessner. Greed, Mr. Pennington. Debt and hatred, Monsieur Doyle. And passion, Mademoiselle de Belfort. Yet each piece of evidence points too neatly, like signposts in a storm. Someone herds us toward false conclusions." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "Consider, the dancer Kimbu accused several people, yet he himself could have written the blood message while we argued. He is missing again. The canoe drifts empty downstream. Is he victim or accomplice?" Colonel Race spoke for the first time in an hour. "There is another possibility. The real dancer died in the river the first night. The man who returned was an impostor. Someone who speaks Swahili, knows the ship, and can pass as native in darkness." A chill ran through the room. Poirot nodded slowly. "Exactly, mon colonel. And who aboard this ship has spent 20 years among the tribes, speaks a dozen dialects, and can black his face with boot polish?" Every head turned toward the one man who had been silent throughout, Colonel Johnny Race himself. Race met their stares without blinking. "I could do it," he admitted calmly. "I have done it, in the service of king and empire. But I did not murder Carmichael, nor Mrs. Otterbourne, nor stage this carnival of horrors." Poirot's gaze was almost gentle. "I believe you, because the murderer made one mistake too many." He produced the Queen of Spades found on the deck, the one written in blood. "Look closely at the writing. The letters are formed by a European hand, yes, but the blood was applied with a native finger. See the whorls, the ridges. This print belongs to someone whose fingertips were scarred years ago by thorn bushes." He turned dramatically to Dr. Ludwig Bessner. "Your expedition photographs, Docteur. Your hands are covered in scars from the Luber Thornveld. You bragged of it only yesterday." Bessner stared at his own thick fingers as though they belonged to a stranger. "Ja," he said hoarsely. "The thorns. They tear the skin." The room seemed to hold its breath. Poirot's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow filled every corner. "Dr. Ludwig Bessner, you poisoned Sir Henry with your own curare on the scarab pin you prepared weeks ago. You killed the dancer to silence him. You shot Mrs. Otterbourne with the wire device. You planted evidence on Doyle, on Pennington, on Mademoiselle de Belfort, everywhere but the true source. And tonight you wrote your final taunt in blood taken from the man you had already stabbed." He stepped closer. "But you forgot one thing. The Queen of Spades is not an African card. She is European. She is you." Bessner's face collapsed like wet paper. For a moment he seemed about to speak. Then his hand flashed to his pocket. Race's revolver roared once. Dr. Bessner fell backward, a neat red hole in his temple, the unfired derringer spinning across the floor. In the ringing silence, Poirot sighed. "It is finished," he said quietly. "The scarab has claimed its last victim, its thief." But outside, the Congo rolled on, dark and impassive, and somewhere in its depths the empty canoe drifted southward, carrying the real Queen of Spades toward the sea. Chapter 8. The False Confession. The shot still echoed when Dr. Bessner's body hit the floor. Blood spread slowly across the polished teak, dark as the Congo itself. Colonel Race stood over him, revolver lowered, face carved from stone. Poirot did not move. For the first time in days, his eyes were not bright. They were old and infinitely weary. "Mon colonel," he said softly, "you have just killed an innocent man." A gasp swept the saloon. Race's knuckles whitened on the gun. "Explain yourself, Poirot." Poirot knelt, beside Bessner. The doctor's eyes were still open, fixed in astonishment. From his waistcoat pocket, Poirot drew not a derringer, but a small silver hypodermic case. Inside lay one remaining ampule of crystalline curare. "He carried this to end his own life if cornered," Poirot said. "He believed himself guilty. He wanted to be guilty. But he was not the murderer, only the perfect scapegoat." Hastings found his voice. "But the scars, the blood fingerprint, the journal, all arranged," Poirot replied. "Arranged with devilish skill by someone who studied Bessner for years, who knew every weakness, every resentment." He rose and faced the room. Dr. Bessner did hate Sir Henry, that much is true. In 1928 he was betrayed, left for dead, robbed of credit and the emerald scarab. For 8 years he nursed that hatred. But was a scientist, not a killer. He talked of revenge, wrote furious letters he never posted, collected curare for research. All of it harmless, until someone decided to use him as the perfect mask. Lynette Doyle's voice trembled. Then who? Poirot turned slowly toward the one person no one had truly suspected since the first night. Colonel Johnny Race, he said quietly. Race did not flinch. Careful, Poirot. That is a serious accusation. It is the only one that fits every fact. Poirot began to pace, voice calm, relentless. You knew Carmichael in 1928. You were the expedition's intelligence officer. You saw the betrayal of Bessner. You also saw the gold ingots taken from the Luba Temple. Gold that vanished, supposedly lost in the rapids. But it was not lost. It was hidden by you against the day you left the service. Race's eyes flickered, just once. You rejoined this voyage at the last moment, Poirot continued. You encouraged Sir Henry's paranoia so that I would be invited. You needed me here, to watch the drama, to point at everyone except you. You poisoned the scarab pin weeks ago in Vienna, using Bessner's published formula. You bribed the dancer Kimbu to touch the brooch, then poisoned him when he became troublesome. Race smiled thinly. Fairy tales? No, truth. Poirot produced the child's red fishing reel from his pocket. This was never found in Bessner's cabin. It was found in yours, wrapped in oilskin with your old service revolver, the one that fired the .25 bullet into Mrs. Otterbourne. You built the wire catapult on the boat deck, fired downward through the porthole, then dropped everything into the river. But the reel snagged on your own boot and tore free later. He held up the reel. A scrap of khaki cloth was caught in the spool, identical to Race's bush jacket. You wrote the blood messages using Bessner's scarred finger after you knocked him unconscious last night. You stole Kimbu's blood while pretending to treat him. You planted the journal, the curare, the hat, everything to make Bessner the monster. Race's smile vanished. You staged the returning dancer yourself, Poirot went on, voice rising for the first time. Blackened your face, wore the leopard skin, spoke Swahili like the native you are after 20 years in the bush. You cut the canoe loose tonight to create panic. And when I accused Bessner, poor, broken Bessner, you shot him to silence him forever and to end the play triumphantly. The Belgian lieutenant stepped forward, pistol drawn. Colonel Race, you are under arrest. Race looked at the ring of faces, some horrified, some suddenly understanding, and for the first time the mask slipped. The urbane officer was gone. In his place stood a man who had lived too long in darkness. You have no proof, he said flatly. I have every proof. Poirot reached into his pocket and drew out the emerald scarab itself, wrapped in silk. You forgot to retrieve the one thing that started everything. Sir Henry mailed it to me in Brussels 3 weeks ago, with a letter begging protection. I have worn a paste copy since we boarded. This, the real scarab, has been in my cabin safe all along. He unwrapped it. The great beetle blazed green fire. Race stared at it, transfixed. That stone was meant to buy my freedom. Gold from the Luba hoard is hidden in Stanleyville. With the scarab as proof of ownership, he stopped, realizing he had said too much. Poirot's voice was almost sorrowful. You killed for a legend, mon colonel, and you used a good man's hatred to hide your own greed. Race moved like lightning, faster than anyone expected. He seized Rosalie Otterbourne, twisted her in front of him, and pressed his old service revolver to her temple. Back, he snarled, or the girl dies. Chaos, shouts, weapons raised. Poirot did not move. You will not shoot, Colonel. You are a soldier, not a butcher of girls. Race's hand trembled. Sweat poured down his face. "Let her go," Poirot said gently. "It is finished." For a long moment the saloon held its breath. Then, slowly, Race lowered the revolver. The fight had gone out of him. He looked suddenly old. "I should have known," he said bitterly, "that no one outwits Hercule Poirot." The lieutenant snapped on handcuffs. Race did not resist. As they led him away, he paused beside Poirot. "Carmichael took everything from Bessner," he said quietly. "I only took back what was mine." "No," Poirot replied. "You took 3 lives for a stone that was never yours." Race was gone. The door closed behind him. Silence fell, broken only by Lynette Doyle's quiet sobbing and the distant splash of the paddle wheel, as the Carnac at last moved forward towards Stanleyville. Poirot stood alone in the centre of the room, the emerald scarab heavy in his palm. "Order and method," he murmured to himself. "But sometimes, mes amis, even order cannot wash away the darkness." Outside, the Congo flowed, on carrying the empty canoe southward, and the morning light turned the great river the colour of fresh blood. Chapter 9. The Last Trick. The SS Carnac steamed northward again, engines steady, smoke rising thin and straight into a sky bleached white by noon. Colonel Johnny Race sat handcuffed in the captain's cabin under double guard, silent, staring at the emerald scarab that now lay on the table between him and the Belgian lieutenant. The great green beetle seemed to watch him back. In the smoking room, the passengers kept to themselves, stunned by the speed of the reversal. Dr. Bessner's body had been sewn into canvas and laid in the cold store beside Sir Henry and Mrs. Otterbourne. 3 dead, and the voyage not yet half done. Hercule Poirot stood alone on the upper deck, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the endless green walls of forest sliding past. Hastings approached hesitantly. "I say, Poirot, are you absolutely certain about Race? It seemed so clear Bessner was guilty." Poirot sighed, a small, tired sound. "My friend, nothing was clear. That was the beauty of the crime. Race built a cathedral of misdirection, and Bessner's real hatred was the perfect cornerstone." He turned, moustache drooping slightly. "Think back. Every piece of evidence pointed to someone, yet never quite proved. The curare in Bessner's bag, the journal in Pennington's mattress, the pistol in Jacqueline's cabin, the scarf at the porthole. All planted by a man who had access to every cabin, who moved unseen because no one ever suspects the guardian." Hastings nodded slowly. Race was everywhere and nowhere. "Exactly. He encouraged Sir Henry's fear so that I would be summoned. He knew the scarab was the perfect weapon, knew Bessner's formula, knew the dancer could be bribed for a few francs. He staged the impossible shot because he alone understood African fishing devices and British Army improvisations, and when Kimbu escaped death by accident, Race used the man's return as the final act, blacking his face and speaking Swahili to accuse everyone else." A pause. The paddle wheel churned. "But the scarab itself," Hastings said. "You told us you had the real one all along." "A necessary lie," Poirot admitted. "The real scarab never left Sir Henry's cravat until the moment he died. Race believed I possessed it. That is why he never searched my cabin. Fear that I held the proof of the hidden gold kept him cautious until the very end." Hastings shivered despite the heat. Cold-blooded devil. "Cold-blooded and brilliant," Poirot corrected. "He almost succeeded. If Bessner had not been driven to suicide by false guilt, Race would have walked free in Stanleyville with the gold waiting." Below, the lieutenant emerged with Race. The colonel's face was grey but composed. As they passed the smoking-room door, Jacqueline de Belfort stepped out. She looked at Race for a long moment, then, spoke in a voice only he and Poirot could hear. "You used us all," she said softly. "Simon's weakness, Linnet's money, my madness, Bessner's hatred. You made us dance like puppets while you pulled the strings." Race met her eyes. "And you, little cat, would have killed for love. We are not so different." Jacqueline smiled, a strange, sad smile. "Perhaps not, but I never killed." She stepped aside. Race was led away. That evening, as the sun sank in a furnace of red, Poirot gathered everyone on the promenade deck one last time. The air smelled of wood smoke from native villages and the sweet rot of the river. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "justice is served, yet it leaves a bitter taste. 3 lives for a green stone older than empires. Colonel Race will face court-martial in Leopoldville. The Luber gold will be returned to the Belgian authorities. The scarab will go to a museum." And yet, he held up the emerald beetle. In the dying light, it seemed alive, wings trembling, and yet the curse was never supernatural. It was human greed wearing the mask of superstition. Sir Henry stole it in 1928. Bessner coveted it. Race killed for it. The river has seen 1,000 such stories. Linnet Doyle, pale but composed, asked, "What will happen to Kimbu?" "He will be paid well and sent home to Matadi," Poirot replied. "Without him, accidental survivor, the truth might never have surfaced." Simon Doyle stood beside his wife, hand no longer shaking. Pennington had been quietly arrested for embezzlement. The scandal would ruin him, but not murder. Rosalie Otterbourne approached Poirot, eyes red-rimmed. "My mother died for gossip and gin," she said quietly. "Will you see that her name is kept clean?" Poirot took her hand. "She was foolish, mademoiselle, but she was not evil. The world will remember the killer, not the victim." Night fell. The Karnak's lights came on, a brave cluster against the immensity of Africa. Passengers retired early. No one wished to linger. Poirot and Hastings stood at the rail, watching the moon rise over the water. "Funny thing," Hastings said. "I still can't quite believe Race was the monster." "Mon ami," Poirot replied. "The most dangerous monsters wear the faces of gentlemen. That is why Hercule Poirot trusts only the little grey cells." He slipped the emerald scarab into his pocket. "Tomorrow we reach Stanleyville. Civilization, electric light, telephones. And yet I think I shall miss the Congo. Here, at least, evil showed its true face." Far behind them, a single canoe drifted on the current. Empty now, rocking gently, the Queen of Spades nailed to its prow with a thorn. The river carried it southward, toward the great falls and the sea, where all secrets finally dissolve. On the Karnak, the engines throbbed, the lights burned, and the night closed around them like a fist. But for the first time in 6 days, no one was afraid to sleep. Chapter 10. The Emerald Closes Its Wings. Stanleyville, 2 days later. The SS Karnak tied up at the government wharf beneath a sky the color of brass. Heat shimmered off the tin roofs. Uniformed askari stood in rigid lines. A military band wheezed through the Belgian national anthem, while the tricolour crawled up the flagstaff. Everything was order. Everything was ceremony. Yet the smell of the river still clung to the ship like a memory that would not be washed away. Hercule Poirot descended the gangway last, valise in one hand, the emerald scarab wrapped in silk in the other. A young Belgian official saluted and offered an escort of 6 soldiers. Poirot declined with a courteous smile. "I have faced greater dangers than the streets of Stanleyville, merci." On the quay, the survivors waited in a small, awkward knot. Linnet and Simon Doyle stood close together, her hand tucked into his arm, the first genuine tenderness visible between them since the voyage began. Pennington had already been taken away in irons. His confession of embezzlement had spared him the murder charge, but ruined him forever. Rosalie Otterbourne, dressed in sober black, was booking passage home to England. Her mother's body followed in a lead-lined coffin. Jacqueline de Belfort was nowhere to be seen. She had quietly disembarked at an upriver mission the night before, leaving only a brief note for Poirot. Some shadows are best left to the jungle. Colonel Johnny Race came last, wrists cuffed, flanked by 2 tall askari. The military police had treated him with the stiff respect due a former officer. He paused at the head of the gangway when he saw Poirot. "You were right," he said simply. "I lost myself somewhere between the Luba Hills and the war. The scarab was only the excuse." Poirot regarded him for a long moment. "You were a brave man once, mon colonel. Bravery turned inward becomes poison. Remember that in the years you have left." Race gave the ghost of a salute and walked down the gangway without looking back. Kimbu, the dancer, stood a little apart, dressed now in clean khaki and clutching a fat envelope of Belgian francs. He grinned when he saw Poirot and touched his forehead. "Asante sana, buona detective. The river gave me back my life. I will dance no more for white men." Poirot pressed a small gold coin into his hand. "Dance for joy instead, mon ami, and forget the Queen of Spades." The formalities were brief. In the governor's office, beneath a lazily turning fan, Poirot handed over the emerald scarab. The governor, a thin man with a monocle, turned it reverently in his fingers. "Magnificent! Brussels will be delighted. The Musée du Congo Real has waited 50 years for this piece." He hesitated. "There is talk of a decoration, Monsieur Poirot. The Order of Leopold, perhaps." Poirot waved the suggestion away. "I seek only the truth, Excellency, not medals. Though a small glass of your excellent cassis would not be—" "Refused!" They drank together while clerks drew up papers. Outside, the sun hammered the dusty square. Inside, the fan creaked like an old man's bones. That evening, Poirot dined alone on the hotel terrace, overlooking the great bend of the Congo. The river was wide here, almost gentle, sliding past Stanleyville toward the falls that would hurl it, furious again, into the heart of the continent. Lanterns reflected in the water. Somewhere, a gramophone played a scratchy waltz. Captain Hastings joined him, pink and freshly shaved, a cablegram in his hand. "From London, old man. The Yard wants you back at once. Something about a murdered archbishop." Poirot sipped his sirop de cassis and smiled at the stars. "Always another murder, Hastings. Always another little drama for the little grey cells." He turned the silk-wrapped bundle over in his hands one last time. "But tonight I think of Africa. Vast, ancient, cruel, and yet magnificent." He unwrapped the scarab. In the lantern light, the emerald wings seemed almost astir, as though the beetle prepared to fly. "Do you know, Hastings, I almost kept it. One small irregularity in the paperwork, and Hercule Poirot could have retired to a villa on the Nile, surrounded by antiquities. Temptation comes in many forms." Hastings looked shocked. "You wouldn't?" "Of course not." Poirot laughed softly. "Order and method, my friend, that is the creed." He rewrapped the scarab and placed it inside the small official envelope already addressed to the museum in Brussels. But for one moment, yes, I understood Colonel Race. A steamer's whistle sounded downriver, the night boat to Leopoldville. Poirot rose. "Come, tomorrow we fly to Cairo, then home. London fog will feel very clean after the Congo." They walked together along the terrace. Behind them the river flowed on. dark and silent, carrying away the heat and the horror and the blood of 6 terrible days. At the edge of the light, Poirot paused and looked back once more. "The emerald closes its wings," he murmured, "and the story ends, not with a curse, but with justice. Imperfect, tardy, but justice all the same." Far away, a drum began to beat, slow and steady, the heartbeat of Africa saying farewell. Poirot raised his glass to the night. "To lost expeditions," he said quietly, "and to those who never should have returned from them." He drained the cassis, set the glass down, and walked into the lantern glow without looking back. The Congo kept its secrets, but for once it had surrendered one, and Hercule Poirot carried the satisfaction of that small, hard-won victory all the way home to Whitehaven Mansions.